Of course, Iraq had to be part of my Hot Zone project, and exactly a year later, November, I'm back in Fallujah. It was very important for me to go back to Iraq because I wanted to be embedded with a Marine unit again, and I wanted to see those things that I saw before. You know, there was a lot of unfinished business there for me. Iraq holds a lot of ghosts for me. Obviously, my experience in Fallujah was a very difficult one, but there were a lot of things there that were difficult to see, and a lot of choices that I made on my own that were difficult. I'd become fairly comfortable with what I had done in the mosque incident. Where I felt I had failed in Iraq was in one way my humanity. I had an incident during the Battle of Fallujah. An individual had been shot by a sniper, an Iraqi man. He was an older man. And I saw that he was still breathing, and I saw this trail of blood. And someone said, "Shoot that guy." And one of the Marines that I was standing there with said, "Are you going to videotape this if I shoot this guy?" And I said, "Well, you know, I have to. You know, it's one of those situations. I have to do that job." He says, "Well, I'm not going to do it. You know, I'm not going to end up, you know, going to jail or whatever." They decided to move on, and it wasn't his decision, but my decision that I came to regret the most is that I didn't do anything for that man. He was still alive, and I probably couldn't have saved his life, but I could have either given him some comfort, squeezed his hand for a second, or stayed with him, you know, tried to say something to ease his passing. And yet, I was a little fearful of doing that in front of the Marines, you know, looking like I was too sympathetic. And in some ways, I wasn't exactly sure what to do. And the fighting started going on again, and I looked back a couple of times, but I went on and I covered that fighting, and I left that man behind. Later on, during that particular battle, I helped carry a wounded Marine, you know, out of a similar situation. This one had been shot in the head by a sniper as well, but survived. But I grabbed the end of a stretcher, and I did it for that man, and yet I didn't do it for the Iraqi man. And that's a difficult thing to come to terms with. So when I went back to Iraq, that was one of the ghosts that I wanted to face. Not so much the mosque shooting, but the image of this man that I basically left there to bleed to death. This time it's so much different. The city is virtually locked down under coalition military control. The insurgents appear to be gone, and there's little violence, but only a third of the population has returned, and much of the city is still in rubble from that furious fight. The mosque where the shooting took place, I've learned, was leveled shortly after the incident, burying its dark secrets under piles of debris. On a midnight patrol with Echo Company of the 2-6 Marines, I find myself walking the same streets, which a year ago were filled with the sounds of tanks and machine guns. On this night, the only sound is the barking of dogs. The Marines in my viewfinder are painted green by the camera's infrared light. Moving tactically from corner to corner, they look like phantoms to me. Here I'm one too, a phantom chasing the ghosts of the past, which maybe only the dogs can see. When I went to Iraq, I also went to the north, what the Kurds who live there call Kurdistan. And it's a large enclave of mostly ethnic Kurds that at one point were under the control of Saddam Hussein, but who had always fought a rebellion against him. It's like a completely different country. It's much more peaceful up there. The bombings weren't happening there to the same degree that were happening in Al-Anbar province in Baghdad. I was working with a fixer that I had worked with several years before during the invasion of Iraq, and he took me to a museum that I didn't know existed in Salmania, and it was called Red Security. And this had actually been a secret police headquarters for the region, where so many Kurds were taken there and they were tortured and killed during the time when Saddam Hussein controlled all of Iraq.
There were many kinds of tortures. For example, some of them were executed or slaughtered by Saddam Hussein. Some of them were imprisoned for the rest of their life, and the other people were kept in jails while the security forces of Saddam Hussein torturing them in the most severe way.
This is the solitary confinement room. It's tiny. It's about 2.5 feet wide by 4 feet. This is a place where prisoners that Saddam wanted to punish severely were placed, and it looks like it would be a very terrifying place to be locked up in.
It was a story that got incredible response because at the same time, there's been a debate going on in the United States over the use of torture, over the use of getting information and trying to use force or coercion against enemy combatants. How much is allowed? How much can the United States use? And there's also been a lot of controversy over the prison at Guantanamo Bay. And so the people that were responding to us were looking at this particular situation, and some would say, see, the war in Iraq was justified, look what Saddam Hussein was doing. And others would say, look what we're doing in this war on terror.